is cooking.
Welcome to your next installment of Mr. Shuck's Flipped ELA. Today we will be taking some notes on the next reading selection from our textbook, which is entitled Barrio Boy by Ernesto Galarza. This begins on page 124 in your textbook, and for this learning cycle we will be doing small group instruction. To complete this flipped lesson, you will need your Talking to the Text organizer, you will need your textbook, and you will need your journal. We're going to begin today by taking a look at the Make the Connection section on page 124 of the textbook. Please follow along as I read aloud. I wasn't able to be myself. Here is a brief true story that connects to the autobiography you're about to read. Guadalupe Solis immigrated to the United States from Monterrey, Mexico. When she arrived, one of her first big jobs was to learn English. She remembers that when I moved here, I wasn't able to be myself because I couldn't speak. People couldn't know me because I couldn't communicate. Guadalupe learned English by writing down the words she heard and then looking them up in the dictionary. She also found patient people who helped her with her new language. Sometimes I would go to the store to practice my English. The store clerks had to be patient with me because they were trying to sell me something. People who are trying to learn a new language should not feel inferior. They should say to themselves, I'm going to be bilingual. Now, even when I don't have to talk in English, I do anyway. Now, I dream in English. At this time, I would like you to take out your journals and a writing utensil. We will take about 5 minutes to complete a journal activity. Describe what you would do if you lived in a place where you did not speak the language. How would you communicate with others? What could you do for others to understand you? How can people communicate without speaking to one another? We are going for a minimum of 1 paragraph in our journals. Take about 5 minutes of writing time to respond to this prompt. Now that we've finished with our journals, we are going to turn to our Talking to the Text organizer, where we will now add a few cool words with the definitions. First is the word barrio. A barrio is a Spanish-speaking community. Next, we will add the word gringo. A gringo is a Spanish term for a foreigner. Please now move down to your academic words section, where we will add some new academic words for this reading selection. A protagonist is another name for the main character in a work of literature. So from here on out, when we are talking about the main character in a text, we will try to refer to that character as the protagonist. An antagonist is anything that goes against the main character. An antagonist does not have to be a person. An antagonist can be something like language if it presents a barrier for the protagonist. The big thing to remember about an antagonist is that it is not the bad guy in a story. The protagonist is not the good guy in a story. Again, protagonist is the main character in a work, and an antagonist is anything that goes against the main character. We will now turn to the Reading Skills and Strategies section on page 124. I would like you to read this independently. We will now follow along with the background section, Literature and Social Studies, also on page 124. Ernesto Galarza was born in 1905 in Jalcocotan, a village in western Mexico, with a main street that he says was just wide enough to park 6 automobiles hub to hub. In 1910, when the Mexican Revolution threatened their peaceful mountain home, Ernesto, his mother, and 2 uncles left their village for Mazatlan, Mexico. Eventually, they moved to Sacramento, California, and lived in what Galarza called a rented corner of the city, the barrio, or Spanish-speaking neighborhood. Like thousands of other immigrants, Galarza confronted the values and customs of American city life, adjusting gradually and often with difficulty to his adopted country. This time, take a look at the Meet the Writer section, which is on pages 128 and 129 in your textbook. Once again, please follow along as I read this section aloud. For young Ernesto Galarza, coming to the United States meant abandoning everything he had ever known and confronting an alien landscape. He couldn't understand the language, the customs and values were strange. Like millions of other immigrants, he felt lost. He soon discovered that education was the key to making sense of his new life. Eventually, he earned his PhD from Columbia University in New York and then returned to California to teach. Although he was a beloved teacher, Galarza is best remembered for Barrio Boy, his best-selling 1971 account of his journey from Mexico to the United States. Galarza explains how he came to write Barrio Boy. Barrio Boy began as anecdotes I told my family about Jalcocotan, the mountain village in western Mexico where I was born. Among this limited public, my wife, May, and daughters, Carla and Elilu, my thumbnail sketches became bestsellers. Hearing myself tell them over and over, I began to agree with my captive audience that they were not only interesting, but possibly good. Quite by accident, I told one of these vignettes at a meeting of scholars and other boring people. It was recorded on tape, printed in a magazine, and circulated among schools and libraries here and there. I received letters asking for reprints and occasionally a tempting suggestion that I write more of the same, perhaps enough to make a book. Adding up the 3 listeners in my family and the 3 correspondents made a public of 6. I didn't need more persuasion than this to link the anecdotes into a story. Be one of Ernesto Galarza's public. The selection you've read is from the chapter of Galarza's Barrio Boy, University of Notre Dame Press. If you liked it, you'll enjoy reading the entire book. Well, we've just finished our latest flipped lesson, an introduction to Ernesto Galarza's Barrio Boy. Please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Mr. Shucks Flipped ELA, and like the videos as we watch them. Remember to bring your materials to class tomorrow and be prepared for the possible flipped lesson check.